Sean Pickett here with Sales Integrity. Thank you for stopping by the Sales Integrity Podcast. Today we continue our discussion on the topic of prospecting on purpose. So without further ado, let's get today's episode rocking and rolling. Welcome back to the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm Sean Pickett, and we are continuing on with our Prospecting on Purpose series. I appreciate all the feedback from the listeners out there. Had a lot of positive feedback on this series and on the topic of prospecting on purpose overall. And so I'm just going to continue on with this series based on user demand, if you will, or on the request of the audience. Today, we're going to talk about prospecting by the numbers. Previously, we discussed some stats. And that really got a lot of attention from our audience out there. So previously on the last couple episodes, I talked about one stat that was from the B2B lead where they said 50% of sales time is wasted on unproductive prospecting. The lesson learned here is if you're not prospecting on purpose, if you don't have a method to your madness, then you're going to be part of the 50% of that time, or you're going to be a sales professional who 50% of the time is just wasting time on unproductive prospecting. So it makes sense to really think through your sales game and how you're going to prospect ahead of time before you start going off and doing. I always like to say, there's really two aspects of the sales game. There's thinking and there's doing, right? Just to simplify this, thinking and doing. Thinking is the strategy. It's coming up with your game plan before you go out and start executing it. And then tactics are actually the tasks you're going to execute within that game plan. Too many sales professionals that we come across when we first start working with them, they're just automatically doing because they're naturally trying to go out there and achieve the numbers, but they haven't slowed down enough to pause and say, okay, let me think through my plan. Let me do the thinking first before I start doing. So when I am doing, I'm working in a more efficient manner, if you will. So that was the first stat that we had talked about before. We had also quoted Hubspot based on some recent research they conducted on prospecting, where they said 44% of salespeople give up after one follow-up, yet 80% of sales require 5 follow-ups. So keep that in mind. 44% of salespeople have an 80% probability they won't close the sale. You're just not putting yourself in a good position if you're only following up one time. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you want to hear a previous episode that I did on the Sales Integrity Podcast that was all about follow up and follow through, you can go back to podcast episode number 10, where the title of it was Follow Up and Follow Through, 2 Crucial Skills of Top Sales Achievers. So definitely go back and listen to that one. That provides some good ideas on the difference between follow up and follow through and how you could put that to work for you as a sales professional, so you're not part of this 44% of salespeople who give up after one follow-up. The research shows you need, 80% of sales require 5 follow-ups. Well, let's dig into that a little bit further. I have 3 more mind-blowing sales statistics, as HubSpot calls it, 3 more of these to share with you as it relates to this same topic of sales prospecting by the numbers. The first stat is by Serious Decisions. This is research conducted by Serious Decisions, where they said the average salesperson only makes 2 attempts to reach a prospect. So this is right on the first outreach, right? This is talking about just reaching out to a prospect. This isn't the follow-up. So that previous stat by HubSpot said 44% of salespeople give up after one follow-up. So that assumes I connected with a prospect once, and I followed up with them based on that initial interaction with them, whether it was a phone call, a meeting, or otherwise, but they're not getting back to me. So I just gave up after that. So that's what that HubSpot study shows. The Serious Decision study shows that before I even connect with a prospect, the average salesperson only makes 2 attempts. And if they don't connect with them, they move on and never get back to that individual. So that to me, really says, okay, I'm not organized. This is the lesson learned. That says that I'm not organized as a sales professional to understand, what am I going after? So again, it's back to thinking and doing. I haven't thought through, I'm targeting these 50 accounts or these 100 accounts. If you're just targeting every type of account, every type of role, every type of title, but you're not really you don't have a method to your madness on who you're going after and what accounts and what contacts, then you're just going to simply kind of churn through calls and outreaches through social media and email. And you're just going to give up because you're just hoping that anything will stick. So it's that old saying of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? There's no method to that madness. There's no way you can control that. But if you target, let's say, 100 accounts, and I'm going to go after these 100 accounts in the next 3 months, and I'm going to identify 3 titles or 3 types of people I'm going to reach out to, that's going to be my target audience. It's going to be a CIO, it's going to be a COO, and it's going to be a CISO, right? A Chief Information Security Officer is that last one. It's going to, and then a CIO, Chief Information Officer, and then a Chief Operating Officer. So let's just say it's going to be those 3. So that's 300 contacts you're going to go after that you're going to reach out to in the next 3 months. So keep that in mind, that the reason why that stat exists, that the average sales rep only makes 2 attempts, is because they're not thinking through the pool of contacts that they're going to have to go after. They don't have all that information. They're just kind of churning through it. When you get that information, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to think through a systematic touch points plan that you're going to execute for the next 3 months to reach out to every single one of those 300, but not only reach out to them, but to have minimum 6 touch points. And those 6 touch points could be through various methods. Picking up the phone and calling them, sending them an email, sending them an in-mail, sending them a direct message or tweeting them on Twitter, going to an event, inviting them to an event, or going to an event that they're speaking at. So there's a whole variety of touch points, but it takes thinking time. You want to sit down and think through, what is my touch points plan? What is that systematic touch points plan that I'm going to execute across all 300 of these contacts? I promise you, if you go through that thinking exercise and you have 300 contacts you're going to reach out to for 3 straight months, that's 100 contacts a month. That doesn't mean it's 100 touch points. That just means that's 300 people. And if you're going to do 6 touch points for each of them, that's 1,800 touch points in 3 months. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying 1,800 cold calls or just only phone calls. You need to have a well-balanced system to be able to reach out to them that has a blend of those various strategies of email, calling, social selling, and the different tools associated to that. And strategic networking. We're reaching out to your network and leveraging the contacts that you know and that know you. So really having a well-balanced approach between all those methods is going to avoid putting you in that classification of the average salesperson that only makes 2 attempts to reach a prospect. The only ones that fit that bill are the ones that are just winging it and flying by the seat of their pants, and they're not prospecting on purpose. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And then the next stat is by Velocify, the research they conducted. And this one is 93% of converted leads are contacted by the 6th call attempt. So 93% of converted leads are contacted. So that means converted leads means that a lead that ultimately becomes a client, their business, they sign an agreement with you. So that's what a converted lead means. We converted that lead into a customer. Okay. So 93% of converted leads, according to Velocify, are contacted. So that means they're initially contacted by the 6th call attempt or contact attempt. So again, if you go back to my exercise I talked about, where you're going to think through your plan and come up with a systematic touch points plan, I would make sure you have at least 6 touch points in there. Preferably 8 or more. And here's why. The next and last research I'm going to go over here, the source is Telenet and Ovation Sales Group. And this is a very interesting one. In 2007, it took an average of 3.68 cold call attempts to reach a prospect. Today, it takes 8 attempts. So in 2007, 10 years ago, it took just under 4 cold call attempts just to reach a prospect initially, that initial contact point. Today, it takes 8 attempts, so double the amount of time. Why? Because we live in a noisy world, right? And there's lots of competition, and there's social selling, social media. There's just a lot to deal with. They're overloaded with emails that are coming in. And so there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more noise. How do you stand out in that sea of competition for attention, right? And so that's really the key there. So not only do you want to sit down and do that thinking exercise to come up with your tactical plan for systematic, touch points plan, but you want to think of probably at least 8 touch points, and each one of them you're going to blend it between a well-balanced approach between these different methods that I've already talked about. Social selling, which includes the use of LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Maybe there's some other ones. You go to Quora and answer some questions where your prospects may be asking questions out there. There's other tools out there that you can leverage besides that big three of LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. But social selling, there's a whole bunch of elements there. Emailing, phone calls. Yes, the phone is alive and well, so you can pick up the phone and make outbound, proactive calls. Okay, but you've got to make sure you're well researched and you leverage those other methods to make sure you're well informed before you're calling in. You're calling in with a value added touch point. And then strategic networking. This tends to be the best method for knocking down obstacles, opening doors up into ideal target market prospect accounts. Because if people in your network that know you, like you, and trust you refer you into a target market customer that you've been trying to get into, that's going to open up a door a lot faster, and it's going to remove a lot of barriers of lack of trust. You're going to have power through association through someone in your network because they're already going to have a relationship established with that contact. So just keep that in mind. So just to summarize here, and we're keeping this succinct here today, but just to summarize the stats, the average salesperson only makes 2 attempts to reach a prospect. 93% of converted leads are contacted by the 6th call attempt. And in 2007, so 10 years ago, it took an average of 3.68 cold call attempts to reach a prospect. Today, it takes 8 attempts. So what's the lesson learned, and how does that affect your sales game today in 2017? Number 1, you should prospect on purpose. How do you do that? Well, number 2, you sit down and you have thinking time before you go out and start doing. The thinking time that you're going to spend is you're going to come up with a tactical plan, what we call a touch points plan or systematic touch points plan, that's going to encompass at least 8 touch points. Those 8 touch points will be a nice balanced approach and a blended mix of methods between social selling, strategic networking, proactive outbound calling, and proactive outbound emailing. So that's kind of the 4 cornerstones, as we call it, of prospecting strategies. So you're going to have a well-balanced approach, and each one of those touch points, you should be adding value. So it shouldn't be just calling to sell your product or service. It should be calling with something of value to share with them, maybe a case study of another customer you help that are similar to their account. Maybe it's an invitation to an upcoming event where they can network with like-minded peers and learn from that event. Maybe it's a link to a video of a topic that maybe you found out through following them on Twitter that they're interested in. So here's a short video I saw on Twitter. You tweeted about your interest in business intelligence, your interest in Internet of Things, or whatever it may be, information security. Here's a great TEDx speech that I thought you might find valuable given your interest in that topic. So try and stand out from a sea of competition by having value-added touch points that you're going to add value first before you're going to receive anything back. So that summarizes prospecting by the numbers in our updated series here of Prospecting on Purpose. Hopefully you found some value out of this, and you can quickly summarize how you can customize my recommendations for your game plan as it relates to selling in the real world for yourself. And right now we're going to wrap up the episode with a few quick reminders. All right. Reminder number 1, if you haven't signed up for our free 7-day video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling, then you should do so right away. Go ahead and visit mastercomplexselling.com. Again, it's mastercomplexselling.com. Reminder number 2, if you want to ask a question and have me feature that on the podcast to answer your question, then just send an email to asksean@salesintegrity.com. Again, it's Ask Sean, and I spell it S-E-A-N. So Ask Sean at salesintegrity.com. Number 3, if you haven't already done so, please rate the show. If you've been listening a few times and you get a sense of what the show is about and you feel comfortable, I greatly appreciate a 5-star rating and a quick 1 to 2 sentence review. You could do so on iTunes. Just search for the show and then click the ratings and reviews and go ahead and just add it there. And then final reminder, if you haven't already joined one of our 2 B2B Tech Sales Professionals group, you could do so on either Facebook or LinkedIn. Just go ahead and search for B2B Tech Sales Professionals, and it'll pop up, and you can just join right there. So once again, thank you for listening to today's episode. Go out there today and help your customers buy what they want, what they need, and what benefits them. And most importantly, go out there and make it a great day.